Greetings and salutations, and thank you for clicking on the video. This time around I got a bunch of little things to talk about, and some of you guys might be really interested in a few of the things that I have to show you and discuss as we roll along. First of all, I want to tell you about this wallpaper, because people always ask about wallpaper. This is the wallpaper for Ubuntu 8.04. This was the default wallpaper, and I was looking at an article in OMG Ubuntu a couple days ago. They had this really neat thing where they had all of the wallpapers from the first version of Ubuntu all the way up to the latest. And this caught my eye. Ubuntu 8.04 always made me smile because that was the first one that I really started playing with years ago. And so I wanted to relive those happy memories, so I downloaded the wallpaper. You can find it anywhere on the internet. A lot of people have it posted, so just do a search in Google for Ubuntu 8.04 wallpaper if you really like it. A lot of the wallpapers that I show in my videos, they're on easylinux.com, so you can go there, and I have a wallpapers page where you can click on it and then you can save yourself a copy, but not this one because this came with a distribution. So I wanted to point that out right up front because people always ask about wallpapers these days. I get a lot of people asking about that stuff. Anyhow, so the first thing that I want to talk about in this video is VirtualBox. And I was trying to figure out some ways to make VirtualBox a bit more efficient and to make it go a little bit faster. So let me open up a terminal here because I have some things to show you. VirtualBox is, would you get it? The white line, I don't need that, thank you. VirtualBox, what it ordinarily does when you install it is all of your virtual machines will go into a folder within your home folder, and that folder is usually called VirtualBox VMs. That's the default setting. And in my case, I'm starting to gather VMs, and I'm usually running one or two at a time because I run VMs to do videos about. I run VMs also to help clients. So if I have a client, let's say, that's on Ubuntu Mate, and I like to have a copy of that up and running, updated, ready to rock and roll. So if they ask me a question, I can jump in, and then I can find exactly where to tell them to go because I can see exactly the system that they're on. And so for a lot of reasons, I've been using a lot of VMs. And since it created this folder within the home folder called VirtualBox VMs, every time that I would do a full system backup of my home folder, guess what? It would back up all those virtual machines. Well, I mean, we're talking 40 gigabytes of stuff here. That took a while to back up, and if I had a bunch of machines open, it's kind of crazy. I have no need to back up virtual machines. I can recreate them. I don't put anything permanent in a virtual machine. And if I do need to change things, I can always manually back them up somewhere, copy them over, and then put them back. That's no big deal. So I kind of wanted to get it out of the home folder, and I thought maybe it would be a good idea to put them on their own partition. So what I did is I created a new partition on my big drive here. This is a 1 terabyte Caviar Black 7200 RPM drive. This is a very fast spinning hard drive, and these are popular in servers, and you just can't get much better than a Western Digital Caviar Black. It's a great drive. But it was very slow in working with virtual machines, and I didn't want to put another hard drive in the machine. I've got a couple of SSDs I got put up, and I thought about maybe I'll just take one of those and stick it in there, and then the virtual machines will be really fast, But no, I don't want to do that. I want to keep this system very simple. I'm trying to maintain this over a long period of time. So I just said, no, here's what I'm going to do. I will shrink down my home partition a little bit, and then I will add a new partition, which is about 300 gigabytes. That should be plenty. When I create virtual machines, I usually give them a 16 gigabyte drive, little virtual hard drive there, and so the file can't get any bigger than 16 gigabytes, so that leaves me lots of room for lots of machines, and we'll keep it from getting fragmented and all that stuff. And then I formatted that particular partition with XFS, and those of you who have been around my channel for a while will know that about a year ago I had a thing with XFS where I was playing around with it, and I went so far as to even use XFS on my boot partition. I don't recommend that. But XFS has some really fine qualities. Number one, it likes large files, doesn't have a problem with working with them. ext4, which is the standard file system for Ubuntu and even Arch Linux and many other Linuxes out there, that it's very stable, and that's why people like it. It's very hard to kill ext4 these days because it is so stable. I mean, you can just turn the computer off, and when the computer boots up, if there's any error at all, FSCK will jump in there and fix it, and you probably won't even know there's anything like that going on. XFS is a little bit different because it's a little bit more of a complex system, and if you get a really hard crash, if it does get corrupted, it crashes hard. I found that out the hard way myself. So that's the downside there. The upside is the file handling. Another downside to XFS is that once you install it, you can't shrink it. Whereas like ext4 doesn't care. You know, you can shrink it, expand it, make it bigger, make it smaller. I don't care. XFS is like, no, choose your size. That's it. I think you can expand XFS with no problems, but you can't shrink it down once you put it in there. In this case, it doesn't matter. It's on the end of the drive. It's never going to do it. You know, never going to change this anyway. And so I created this partition with XFS because I was working with these large files, and that did make it go a lot faster. And the next thing I wanted to do was to actually mount this somewhere outside of the home directory or home folder, because I didn't want, when I did a full system backup, for the backup to grab it and start backing up these VMs, which is exactly what had been happening. Now, I know that you could go in there and you could put exclusions in it, but I like to keep things simple. The simplest way to do that is not mounted in the file system. I don't need to back this crap up anyway. And the other thing is that I wanted VirtualBox to just see this folder that had, it could do anything it wanted in it. And I didn't want to have a drive and a folder within that, and it gets complicated. So let's look at the root here. Some of you guys have already seen, just by looking at the video here, that it is mounted in a folder called VM, and that is in the root file system, and it just sits off on its own. And one of the advantages to that is that it does not show up in the file manager as being mounted. It is mounted, but it doesn't show up because it's not within the home folder. So usually I tell you guys, hey, if you're going to add a partition, if you're going to add an external drive to the system and you want it a permanently added drive, okay, just something like a data drive that you would install, a second hard drive, then I would say mount it in the media folder, and then when the system boots up, you'll have automatic access to that drive. It'll always be mounted to the system. Well, in this case, it does the same thing, but it just doesn't show up, because what you got to do is jump into computer, and then you'll see that here it is. And so if I click on it, look, there's the virtual machines I have installed. So as far as VirtualBox is concerned, and if we jump over here and take a look, I can show you. If I go to permissions, there you go, or rather preferences, there it is. That's where the default is for VirtualBox. So it's got its own little space to work in with its own custom file system, and it really did beef up the performance. When I created that particular directory, I made it mine, so it belongs to me now. And then I was able to set the permissions on that particular drive and everything. So pretty awesome. And it's not in the home folder, so I don't have to worry about it backing up. And now if I'm going to change anything on the system, let's say that the drive starts getting wonky, or if I want to do something, no big deal. I'll just make a copy, back it up manually, use rsync to do that, and everything will be cool. So that's how I did that, and it did make it go a lot faster, let me tell you. So that's a tip. If you're going to be goofing around with VirtualBox, and you notice that even on an SSD, if it's running on the ext4, it will slow down. Red Hat and CentOS these days are now shipping their systems with XFS as the default file system for the home partition. And so obviously they think that it's stable enough to do it. But I got burned on that real bad about a year ago. I was messing around with that, and I thought, oh, this is great. This is so fast. And then I had a couple of hard crashes, and some stuff got corrupted, and I said, I'm not that happy about it. But if I lose a virtual machine, who cares? I can redo a virtual machine. It's no big deal. So I wanted to show you guys that, talk a little bit about XFS. And the next thing that I want to talk about in this particular video is something that will be coming up maybe next month. Hopefully, we're going to take a look at a couple of new distributions or new versions of distributions that have actually been around for a long time. The first is Ubuntu. This is Ubuntu 17.04 Alpha running in a virtual machine. And it looks like Ubuntu. I have done nothing to this. This is how this looks. Okay, I have not changed anything about it. And I didn't want to open up a terminal for the host. I wanted to open up on Ubuntu just to show you guys around a couple of little things. So there's a lot of changes under the hood in Ubuntu 17.04, but there's not that much to look at right now. Of course, it really looks a whole lot like Ubuntu 16.10 because in alpha stage, they usually don't have all the new artwork and everything in here. So I'm not going to pass any judgment on the looks of it or anything like that. It has Unity 8 as an option when you are logging in, so you can play around with Unity 8. It's pretty much useless at this point. So what you're looking at is the latest iteration of Unity 7, which will be the default desktop. Now, one of the big things they've changed, it's kind of silly, because I'm going to say this is a big thing, is that instead of by default creating a swap partition, now Ubuntu creates a swap file. So, if we take a look at the fstab file here, then we can see what they're talking about. Let me see if I can make this a little bigger so it's easier to see. And as you can see, now instead of having a swap partition, it creates a swap file and it puts it in the root directory, and that's it. Big whoop. There's other changes as well, but I'm not going to talk much more about this. The idea here is to just go ahead and run it for a little while and just check in on its progress, and then once it is actually officially declared the 17.04 release, I will update this, and then what I will do at that point is actually get into it and dig around and do a video. I got burnt really bad last year with Ubuntu 16.04. I wanted to do I did all these really groovy videos, and I said, oh, Ubuntu 16.04, it's great, it works great. And then like 2 days after it was officially released, all these bugs popped up from nowhere. So I want to let it cook for a little while this time before I do anything with it. So there you go, that's Ubuntu. Okay, and the next one is OpenSUSE. Had a lot of people ask me about this distribution. People constantly send me stuff and go, are you going to do a thing about blah blah? Would you consider doing a video about blah blah? And the truth is, I don't like to do a lot of distro reviews. I do a look at. And this is one that I'm actually taking a look at. So this is OpenSUSE Leap 43 Alpha. And it is, I don't know, every time it... It's the only thing about working with VirtualBox and Unity. Some of the things don't take the first time. Drives me crazy. But anyway, there we go. That's what I wanted. I have been poking around this system. And when it is officially released, I'm thinking that I'm going to do a video on it. Now, I don't know as much about OpenSUSE as I do about Ubuntu-based stuff. I probably actually know more about Arch Linux and Solus than I do about OpenSUSE because I have never stuck with it for very long. OpenSUSE is definitely its own reality, gang. When I installed it, I chose to have the GNOME desktop simply because of the fact that I'm more familiar with GNOME than I am KDE, and they give you several choices. Probably the most notable choices are GNOME, KDE, and XFCE, and then there's something else. I think they give you Enlightenment, and don't remember what it was in the installer. But OpenSUSE is definitely a very different distribution of Linux. One of the things I did do that was kind of cool was I was able to import my standard bash RC configuration from Ubuntu to OpenSUSE with just a few changes. So if I take a look here, I can show you what I'm talking about. Those of you who saw the video where I went through all of this is pretty much the same up top. But then when I got down here, there was some, in the Joe's aliases section of the file, I got into all this stuff about, well, this isn't Ubuntu, so I had to change it. So like for the update thing, I went ahead and modified it, but I modified it for OpenSUSE. So now instead of being what this command would be sudo apt update, this is sudo zipper ref and then sudo zipper up, and then it updates the system. I can do it from the terminal. And I don't need my bash RC file to be in here. I did that just to see if I could actually transfer it over. So this is kind of a learning experience for me to play with OpenSUSE. And I have looked at this before. I actually ran Leap 42 for a while on my computer, so that was kind of cool, but I didn't stick with it. So the big thing about SUSE is this application that you'll find all the way down at the bottom in the settings, and that is this thing called YAST, and it is a system configuration tool. I'm trying to remember what password I put into this virtual machine. So they've changed the look of YAST quite a bit. It now comes up with this nice little box here. It used to be almost a full screen application with a bunch of icons on it, but now it's kind of divided up in all these little sections. And so you can check your installation media here. You can check for updates and install software and system settings. It's just really, you can pretty much a lot of stuff that with other Linux distributions you would be opening a terminal to do, you can do in OpenSUSE with YAST. And I mean some deep system stuff is in there. So that's one of the cool things about it. Another cool thing about OpenSUSE is the fact that it has this thing called a one-click install. So you can actually go to the OpenSUSE site and then you can search for a package, you can search for a program, and if you find it, then you click on it. Boom, and it will install on your system. And they have a bunch of repositories you can hook up. It's really crazy. And it's very different from Ubuntu. It's very different from Arch Linux. Like I said, I probably know more about Arch and Solus than I do about OpenSUSE. So there you go. And I have always said that if Ubuntu and Linux Mint went away, it just didn't exist anymore, the Linux distribution that I would go to would probably be OpenSUSE, because people who use OpenSUSE are able to do some pretty amazing things with it, and it's just a matter of being used to it and learning the system. So that's what I'm doing. And I didn't change the look of this too much, but of course I had to put some folders on the desktop because I like active desktops, and then I installed the dark theme. So that's pretty much what you get. So we'll talk more about Leap 43 once it becomes an official release. I'm not sure exactly when that's going to be. I know Ubuntu is going to happen sometime in mid-April, but I'm just going to keep an eye on this. And I'm just going to run these and update them and see what changes and see what happens and all that stuff. And when we get to a place where they are official, I will do some more in-depth videos about it. So it's kind of a new approach to that. Usually I just grab something and download it and play with it for a little while and then start the video. This time around I'm going to play with it for a while before I do the video, and that way I might have more interesting things to say. So the last thing that I wanted to show you before I did anything was just for people who have just heard all of that stuff about me mounting that file system. Yes, now I want a terminal on the host, so it works this time the way I want it to. Wouldn't it be funny if it opened up a terminal on the VM and it jumped over here? Doesn't do this when I'm not recording video. Everything works, but no, you record a video and then it goes crazy. So anyway, what I wanted to show you before I wrap this up is how did I get this thing to auto mount? Because people ask this, and if you haven't seen videos about how to mount partitions inside a Linux file system. I'm going to show you. You do it in FS tab. So just like we did before, we're going to do less, and then we're going to do etc and FS tab, and I'm going to show you what I did here. So the FS tab, or file system table file, has all of the stuff that is supposed to be mounted into the system. So let's make that big so we can see the whole thing. And so the first one, of course, is the root partition. That's important. Now, if you don't have your home directory separated out, then it would be within here, because everything is actually in here, gang. All of the root of the file system, all of these files have these directories are in here. So what now we're telling it is that if you have an empty directory anywhere in the root file system, like I created VM, or it will automatically create a directory called home, and then it will mount a drive into that directory. The whole partition just gets stuck into that directory. And as far as the root file system is concerned, it's just part of the file system. The Linux file system does not care where the storage is. It makes no difference to it. Matter of fact, you can have a Linux file system that has several hard drives, network shares, and they all just show up as one big happy file system. And the typical users are oblivious to that this stuff is going on. They don't care as long as their data's there. And it's one of the really strong points of the system. So what I did was create this line down here. Now this is the UUID, the Universal Unique Identifier for this particular partition. And I put that in there. So that tells it what to mount. And then you have to tell it where to mount. And in this case, all I did was create a new directory in the root file system, called it VM. And so that was empty, so it could mount it in there. And that is something that you have to do with root privileges. And then you can change the permissions on that later. And so you put that in there, and then the file system, XFS. And then we have defaults. And what this basically tells the system is exactly what to do with it. So those are the options. So if you're adding a drive or something like that, then you can choose defaults. And then we have dump. And to tell you the truth, I'm not exactly sure what that does. I have to go look that up. At one point I knew what that was. But this number over here is really the important one. You'll notice here that for the root file system, that this last number here, pass, is set to 1. And that tells the kernel, when it's mounting these up as the machine is booting, to run a real quick system check on that particular drive and make sure that the file system is okay before it actually mounts it. So you want to do the root file system first, because if there's any problems, you want to know about that immediately, and then the FSCK program will attempt to fix it. So then you get down to your home directory in this case, and so this is set to 2. Now, these are created by default when I partition the thing, because I told it where to put stuff. And so now that's set to 2. Basically, it's saying, okay, now check this file system. Both of these are ext4. If you add another partition that is ext4, like you have a partition just for data, or you're mounting another hard drive, you can also set that to 2. Basically, what you're saying to the system is check root before you check that. So you could have that pass be 2 there. Now, I don't have that set to 0 here because I'm using XFS. XFS does not work with the standard FSCK program. It has its own tool for dealing with that sort of thing. And so, therefore, you want to just leave that blank, because you don't want the system to actually try and check it. It won't be able to check it anyway. It'll just pass over it and go, I don't know what to do with that. And then with XFS, you have to check it manually, and you use XFS tools to do that. So there you go. I wanted to explain that because people will no doubt ask about it if I didn't. And that's it. That's this video. And thank you for hanging out with me and talking about this stuff, because just little stuff I'm working on in the background I decided to share. Real quick before I go, I want to thank Matt Hartley for posting the latest contribution from me on Freedom Penguin, and it's basically an article that wraps around the video that I posted not too long ago called Beginner's Guide to the Bash Terminal. And so that is available on Freedom Penguin for you to read, and the link for Freedom Penguin is in the description. Also, check out Easy Linux on Facebook. Check out Easy Linux on the web as well. Those links are in the description to this video. And that's it. I will talk to you guys later.